Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. I'm Julian Bonnici. Joining me today is Tim Diakono. I've got another amazing show for you today, this Friday. The headlines are as follows. Our first story is all about how FENECH has been charged with trying to obtain weapons. The second story is all about how Malta's cannabis reform bill is set to be published by October. The third story is about how Malta is getting yet another LIDL supermarket, the 9th of its kind in the country. The fourth story is all about some entertainment news in Malta, with JOAQUIN, FENECH and Andre Pizzuto set to return to Malta to film an epic about Napoleon. And the last story is about animal welfare breaking its silence on euthanized dogs in the country as activists plan yet another protest. After today's stories, we've got an interview with Kamra tal-Periti president Andre Pizzuto to discuss, the industry and general. So stay tuned. It's going to be really interesting. Tim, our first story, all about FENECH in court yesterday.
So yeah, for a change, FENECH is back in the news. This time about weapons that he had purchased back in 2018. November 2018, so this was like around a year after the assassination of Daphne Caruana Galizia, and police charged him in court yesterday with purchasing these weapons, which were believed to have been bought off the dark web using Bitcoin. It's unknown whether they actually arrived at FENECH and whether, and most crucially, why he bought them, why he decided to procure these weapons. Was he planning another murder? This seems to be the implication, right? Then why would he just randomly buy weapons from the dark web? And why, as well, would he use himself? Why would he do it himself and not use a hitman as he had allegedly done the first time round? So was this a sign of desperation? Is something else we don't know about? But what's for certain is that FENECH now has another court case to deal with, over and above the murder case he has been charged with, and we'll be hearing plenty of it. I mean, it just shows, right, though, how dangerous some of these people can be. How they didn't, the weapons that he bought were he tried to buy were 2 grenades, 2 Glock pistols, a Scorpion automatic pistol, and 700 rounds of ammunition. Those 700 rounds, like, what do you need that for?
Yes, no, really scary stuff coming from, a man who's probably allegedly highly dangerous. Remember, actually FENECH was trying to make these purchases soon after he was revealed to be the owner of 17 Black. So it raises real major concerns whether FENECH was targeting any of the journalists reporting on that story. In fact, FENECH wasn't the only weapons weren't the only thing he was trying to buy online. He had also reached out to a certain individual to try hack an unnamed individual who sources believe it could be Jacob Wood of the Time of Malta, who actually had written about this 17 Black reveal. Nothing is confirmed as of yet. A really interesting detail, I think, that came out of court yesterday, right, was that the police said, they've been investigating this for 3 years. Now, I think it raises quite a lot of questions because, they only got FENECH's mobile phone maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, maybe a bit less. So actually, maybe they were onto him well before, he was actually arrested and the weapons he was trying to procure. Lovin Malta is informed that FENECH will not be the only person charged in connection to these purchases, but more on that coming over the next few days. On to our next story. Malta's long-awaited reform to its cannabis laws are set to be published after Parliament reconvenes this October. Some very major news on that front. This came after Owen Bonnici, Malta's reforms minister, told Lovin Malta that the legislation of this is his first priority, and he's almost pledging it's going to be a really good and positive reform. Currently, Bonnici says that there are meetings with stakeholders taking place and discussions are ongoing. Remember, Prime Minister Abela first announced the planned reform in March with a white paper almost suggesting that people will be able to grow up to 4 plants at home and will be completely decriminalize use up to 7 grams, while also heavily decriminalizing possession of up to 23 grams. Now, while there was a lot of goodwill at the beginning, I think that's starting to, subside, as we're nearing the end and the bill is actually going to be proposed. Andrew Bonello from Relief actually told Malta that Lovin Malta that he's positive about the reform, but remains skeptical. Remember, we've had many reforms of this kind in the past, and many times, you know, major loopholes are left in the law. I remember, you know, we decriminalized cannabis and stuff like that a few years ago, but still we're seeing people get sent to prison for cultivating anything more than one plant, no matter the weight. There were even cases where, you know, people had as little as 12 grams and they were being sent to 6 months in prison. What do you think about it, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to reserve my judgment until I see the final bill, because as always with these cases, the devil is in the detail. So we had the great press conferences that pleased a lot of people, the white paper, but now this is it. This is the crunch time. And a couple of crucial points right at the top of my head that to look out for in this bill will be, you know, like you're saying, they're proposing decriminalization of up to 7 grams, but it's already decriminalized in Malta up to a certain point. The problem is that even though it is decriminalized, the police can still interrogate you and take you to a police station and hold you for 48 hours and perform cavity searches on you to try and find out who sold it, who sold the weed to you. Will this remain? They're saying it won't, but then what does it mean? Does that mean that if you're smoking outside, then they can allow you to? Will they still get to confiscate your joint? But why would they do? Because if it's not criminal, if it's not a crime, why would they take it from you? So and another issue is going to be the issue of legal purchase. So the Prime Minister promised that cannabis users will have a place from which they can buy cannabis and seeds legally. Right now, you can only buy it from the black market or medical cannabis. We don't know how. We don't know if it's going to be pharmacies. We don't know if they're going to allow social clubs, if there's going to be some kind of government authority like what's the case in Uruguay, that's the sole dispensary of the plant. But this is something that the law will have to address. If it doesn't, then I'm sure a lot of people will be sorely disappointed with the election coming up. It's important though that between now and October, you know, the cannabis community does make its voice heard, so that the government knows that, you know, there isn't just resistance to it, because sometimes we just hear the resistance to it from groups like Caritas, groups like Awazi. It's important for them to know that there are a lot of people who want these reforms to go through, if not even more so. Moving on to our next story, Malta is getting its 9th LIDL supermarket. The planning authority approved a new LIDL supermarket in Hasdabuch. It's been in the works for a while. Some issues with the planning authority have finally been resolved, and yeah, it's coming. So Malta obviously is quite in love with LIDL, where they have 8 already, and now it's becoming to be a bit of an issue though. In fact, there's quite a discussion going on about how these massive supermarkets encroach upon towns, seduce people with cheap prices, and put several small shops out of business in the process. And yeah, no, probably should be time to start assessing whether there's either a breach of competition law, or if there isn't yet, there will be one time, right?
Yeah, no, it's quite a weird issue, right? How many supermarkets do we actually need in this country? Not to mention on the competition front, you know, there are questions, you know, whether LIDL as a foreign entity, a foreign company, is actually benefiting from massive tax rebates, or also putting it on an unfair playing field with even the local supermarkets in the country. What I think really should happen is the planning authority already has a fuel station policy, for example. I really do think something similar should be applied to supermarkets. Beyond competition concerns are also consumer concerns, right? Consumers' concerns. We keep on consuming at a rapid rate, at such a convenient rate, when really supermarkets and their supply chains are some of the most harmful to the environment, with the amount of plastic they produce, with their massive distribution networks, and so on and so forth. So we cannot continue every little almost open space, which LIDL often takes up, right? Open space, they don't really occupy old buildings, and they take up new spaces and sort of, you know, build these massive things. They don't even buy from Malta. Most of their goods are from abroad. They produce them themselves, and people locally simply cannot compete. And maybe rather than the government directly intervening, there should maybe be some soft measures to ensure that local operators, you know, the lifeblood really of Maltese economy, as many of them like to say, are actually given, you know, some equal footing to compete with a giant like Lidl.
And fair without excess bureaucracy.
On to our next story, a really interesting story for any of you entertainment fans out there. Oscar-winning actor and director Joaquin Phoenix and Ridley Scott are set to return to film Kid Back, which is a film about Napoleon and his rise from his humble beginnings to the emperor we all know today. Scott himself, who actually worked in Malta with Joaquin Phoenix on, you know, the film Gladiator, something we all know well, was actually giving some details about the movie in another entertainment magazine, where he said he's looking to sort of film Napoleon's beginnings in Corsica and has some perfect locations in Malta, particularly certain courtyards around the country. The plans have been actually set in motion for quite some time, with cinematographer Darius Adamvolsky actually visiting the country in May to scout some locations for the film. We don't really know many details of what the film is actually going to be about. So far we know it's going to be released on Apple, so you actually might be getting it on a streaming platform to you, while David Scarpa, who wrote All the Money in the World, actually wrote it. Then about you, Tim, I'm actually quite excited. I'm a bit of a Ridley Scott fan myself, whether it's from Alien, Blade Runner to any of his modern classics now, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a really amazing job.
Yeah, I mean, like, just to be clear, it's not 100% confirmed yet, although the fact that the director has declared his interest is extremely significant. What I wonder is whether they'll be tempted to actually use or somehow slot in the fact that Napoleon did actually live in Malta for just, even if only for a few days. He famously slept in what is now the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the auberge, in auberge in Valletta. So I wonder if they'll try and use this kind of influence and integrate it in the film. But yeah, definitely something to look forward to. Also, would be really great for the local film industry and people to get a chance to work with Joaquin Phoenix, who's literally one of the best actors in the world. We've all watched him on Joker, or if not, you should. And yeah, he's at the top of his game. It would be an honor for most Maltese actors to get a chance to work with him. And finally, animal welfare has broken its silence on an issue that has been heating up in recent days, namely on whether it automatically euthanizes pit bulls instead of rehabilitating them when they come under their care. So animal activists have been flagging this issue in recent days, warning that the animal welfare goes straight for the kill, essentially, when they receive a savage pit bull, and they don't even try to rehabilitate them, they just straight out euthanize them. Animal welfare yesterday denied this. They said that that's not their strategy, that they rescue most of their pit bulls, and they don't discriminate based on whether it's a pit bull or whether it's a dog. But unfortunately, sometimes they do have to put animals to sleep. They said it's on rare occasions based on their medical illness or mental health. They said this is not an easy decision to make, but when it is decided upon by a board, the welfare of the animal in question is always factored in, as well as the risk it poses to the welfare of other animals or the safety of humans. This doesn't seem to have appeased several animal rights activists who will be staging a protest outside animal welfare tomorrow. They said that we're going to be giving a voice to the voiceless. Are you going to be attending this protest?
No, it's actually a really important, I think, issue, right? You know, as in definitely, I do think the animal activists definitely do have a point. You know, we can't be putting down dogs. Sorry, debatable. Hopefully, we can reach a solution. However, I think a jumping off point from this, I think sort of the issue that there currently is in play could actually open up some really good opportunities for Malta's government to start funneling some serious funds into animal sanctuaries across the island. Now, we all know how animal sanctuaries are struggling. You know, they're full up. They simply don't have the funds or resources to maintain the amount of strays they had. However, what we do know is they're actually experts at rehoming dogs, right? Rehoming maybe challenging dogs with challenging behavior, and finding them a loving home. I can't see why, you know, the government doesn't hone in on this expertise, start making sure that dogs that they deem problematic dogs start actually getting behavior training and being rehomed, and at the end of the day, funneling massive funds, you know, to the animal sanctuaries that desperately need it. to be honest, you know, I would like to think, you know, animal welfare and the animal activists really want to be pulling the same rope, right? I think at the end of the day, all they want is the best for the animals in their care. So rather than, you know, constantly addressing conflict and always finding each other at loggerhead, I think it might be better served, you know, to actually work together and strive to find real-time solutions to the major problems facing animals in the country at the moment. That's it for us for now. We're going to play a little video from A Little Smile, which is our documentary about Bjorn Formosa. It was published yesterday. You can check it out on lovinmalta.com. After that, we've got Andre Pizzuto, who's the president from Kamra tal-Periti, for a really exciting interview, so make sure you stay tuned.
I live by the sense of urgency, yeah. Life surprises you. You can do incredible things, even without moving any muscle of your body. Yeah. Għajjejt nibbat in-nies lura d-dar ngħidulhom li ma nistax ngħinhom. Ma li kont naqra li l-isma kien hemm l-ebda tip ta' trattament magħruf, allura kienet sentenza tal-mewt pratikament.
Jekk tkun tħobb persuna jiena nemmen li tagħmel kollox għalih.
We started realizing that most of the people with ALS, they don't have the necessary support they need at home. Tu għalhekk huwa ta' interess nazzjonali dal-proġett jiġi miftuħ kemm jista' jkun malajr.
Hello and welcome back to the show. With me I've got Andre Pizzuto from the Kamra tal-Periti. Hi Andre, how are you? Thanks for coming on the show once again. Just to kick things off, what's the current state of the industry at the moment? You know, we've seen a lot of promises, reforms in the last few years. Are they taking hold? Has there been any change?
Right, so one of, I think the last time I was here, I was complaining about the fact that the Periti Act hadn't passed yet, and in the meantime it did. So that is one important reform that came through, and it's important also because it will help modernize the profession and it will allow the Kamra also to undertake some changes within the structures of the Kamra and the way the profession is set up. So that is one important reform that has already happened. The other one, in the meantime, also there was the setting up of the Building and Construction Authority, which is in its infancy yet, but it is building up, at least from the conversations we're having with their management. They're building up resources to be able to undertake the massive reforms that the industry requires. Obviously, this is going to take time, but the important thing is that we ensure that as we go along, we build a strong foundation to make sure that you know, we have something strong to build upon in the future. So that is our current concern at the moment, to make sure that whatever is being prepared in the background, and I can assure there is work happening, that it is done right. So that is our main focus at the moment.
Without getting into the merits of the case itself or the judgment that came after, do you think Malta's government, or at least Malta's planning policies, have learned a lesson from Miriam Parchet, or do the same sort of issues remain?
So I think that the fallout from the Miriam Parchet incident hasn't. I mean, I think the reaction was insufficient from a regulatory point of view, because a lot of the things that are happening in these types of development are a result of policies that don't look at the full picture. For example, this approach of demolishing a house, one house at a time, the planning policy of imposing minimum parking requirements, which is forcing developers and their consultants and their contractors to excavate even more deeply than they used to. So I think it's time to have a proper rethink of the whole sector, not just building regulation. So planning is not off the hook. We need to have a good look at that as well.
Yeah, and I think obviously following Miriam Potch and also the number of other collapses that happen and the incidents that happen, people also tend to focus maybe on the regulatory approach and sort of the safety approach to it. But another complaint we've sort of been seeing quite a lot online is sort of about the aesthetics of Maltese design, which I'm sure you know well. The government is sort of announcing plans to pursue an aesthetic policy. What should that look like, and what do you think is the government follow-through going to be strong enough?
Right, so let me just first explain what we are doing on this. I can announce here that we've, earlier this year, we've set up 6 permanent committees within the Kamra, and one of them is a permanent committee on architecture, and it is dealing on this issue in a systematic and a very technical manner, because this is not a simple problem. There are a lot of issues that are causing this uglification process, and it's not an easy one to solve. Now, on the announcement of the Minister Farrugia about the aesthetics policy, it all depends on what this policy will be saying and what it's intended to do. There is an intelligent planning consultative forum in which we are participating, and this is being discussed, and we've put forward our ideas on how, one of the ideas on how this can be solved, because obviously, as I'm explaining, it's a very complicated problem. But if the aesthetics policy is going to add even more rules on design, then I fear that we haven't understood what the problem is. We already have policies and rules on how to design a building, and the result is what we're seeing. So the truth is that what we need is architecture, not design rules. So we need to allow architects to design buildings in the way they are trained at university, because unfortunately the minute architects students step out of university and they enter the real world, they are faced with a completely different way of doing things, where basically you are given a set of rules, a set of parameters, and if you don't conform to those parameters, your permit is not issued. And this is the situation we are in. So architecture is not really happening as it should here. So what we have essentially is designing to a parameter. So you are given a mold, and the architects have to design according to a mold that is put in the design regulations. So and to make matters worse, what happens is if a developer or a client feels aggrieved because he feels discriminated, then it becomes a legal matter. So lawyers become involved in the design process as well, which is a theme of architecture. So architecture is about designing to a context, not about precedent or fairness, or it's about does it fit or not in the site, not whether you've given it to someone else down the road. So we need to start moving away from this way, or this codification of design, because firstly, it doesn't exist anywhere else. And secondly, it's not working. So we need to come up with a different way of doing things, and this is what the Architecture Committee within the Kamra is working on. So yeah, that's our position.
Yeah, let's hope. But I mean, I might be speaking a bit biased, but don't you think maybe we're a bit, too far gone in some areas, and they're far from impossible to say?
Yes, that is another subject, but in fact, this is the subject that the Planning Committee is dealing on. I understand that we have the industry over the last 40 years, and not just the industry. When I say it's the architecture, I have to make this point. Architecture is a reflection of society's culture. So the culture of society is reflected in its architecture. So if the architecture is of a certain quality, then obviously there are something underlying the issues of laws, of cultural norms, of attitudes that are influencing the outcome of architecture. But on the point of being too far gone, I think what we need to start doing now is identifying those areas where the urban quality is very poor, and rather than continuing to extend our development zones, we need to start looking at urban renewal and looking at how to undo some of the disasters that have been happening over the last 40 years.
Yeah, that would be, I think a lot of people out there would say probably really positive to see. However, as in truth be told, you know, we always see like a lot of promises from change, at least from a government level. I think even you know, what's the issue? What's stopping Malta from making that jump? I mean, we have many good architects in the country, many good developers in the country. What's happening?
I think there's a bit of inertia in the whole process. It's, the public sector is obviously very difficult to kind of maneuver and try to reform. I think there's a lot of also financial interests that are kind of and concerns that are stalling the process. However, I think with the increase in public awareness, also on the environment, the series of protests that have been happening also on the subject, without getting into the merits of any of them, but I think the tide is starting to change and frustration is starting to take over. So I think politicians are starting to also capture this public sentiment, and I think things are going to start changing. At least that's what I hope.
So just as a counter, so there is obviously this argument that obviously Malta's population growth and population size is what it is. Is there any way we can ever, you know, develop sustainably and aesthetically at the same time?
This issue of population growth is essentially an issue of planning. And basically population growth cannot happen in a vacuum. Growth in population needs to be controlled, in the sense it needs to be catered for. So if there are projections of population growth in one direction or in another, or not just within the size, but also on the demographics, so more aging population or younger people or immigration, so these factors need to be taken into consideration when we're planning our towns. Unfortunately, the local plans that we have date back to 2006 and reflect a reality and an expectation which is obviously now different. So we need to update our policies, we need to update our plans, and we actually need to have plans, because earlier I heard you talking with Tim about the LIDL supermarket. That is also another planning issue. What is happening with the retail industry? Are we killing our towns to have out-of-town developments, out-of-town shopping experiences, and not just a LIDL? This applies to shopping malls, it applies to out-of-town shopping complexes. So is this, and on top of that, because then you start getting a lot of factors, traffic. You know, how are you going to, you have to always use the car to do your shopping. So we can't stop, we can't continue looking at projects in isolation. We need to see at those projects and how they fit in a wider plan. And if there's no wider plan, then everybody's going to keep applying for their own permits because they have a right to.
Yeah, exactly. So is it fair to say, so I mean, at least maybe from the outside, I don't really work with obviously the planning process intimately, probably like you do. But from me, it does seem like there are a lot of loopholes and a lot of get-arounds, you know. Do you think, is the local plan of 2006 at the core of this? Is that the most important sort of plan that desperately needs to be reformed at this stage?
The local plans regulate the way towns themselves are developed. So obviously there are revisions over time, piecemeal revisions, but yes, the local plans are a major factor. It goes before that. There's a 1988 temporary provision schemes, which was another one. And then in the meantime, there are like policies like the C15, the high-rise policy, fuel station policy you mentioned earlier. So there is no consolidated approach and objective and vision of how we want our towns and villages to look, and how they want them to function, and whether people are better served with this type of development or another type. So I think we need to do planning properly. And unfortunately, what we're doing here is development control only. So development control is the issuance of permits. But before that, somebody needs to be setting out a vision, setting out an analysis, and understanding where we need to be. And this has to be preferably a nationwide consensus around this vision. Because we can't have changes in government with changes of vision every 5 years or 10 years or whenever it is. So we need to ensure that that there is a common vision that everybody subscribes to, or a majority subscribes to, so we can have a focus on our quality of life.
Yeah, no, okay. Just one last question. For our viewers, is there anything the chamber is doing, any proposals, anything major that you're working on that they should keep an eye out for?
We are going to be announcing a few things very soon, so I'll keep that for later. But I've mentioned the 6 committees already, so that's something new to mention.
Okay, so keep an eye out, and clearly they have some very big things on offer, so keep an eye out for the Kamra tal-Periti and what they're going to be proposing in the next few months. That's it from us from today, and have a day full of love.